Okay, everyone. Well, I'm going to do another one of these videos. And this is a channel called Wartime Stories. And just to let you know, I actually really like this. Even though I am not, the kind of person who believes in every story everyone tells by far, and I believe skepticism should be the default in any story with no evidence, I do like the stories. I like them. I like them a lot. I listen to them. And, as long as they're not ones that are based in like known factual data and we know what happened, but it gets twisted and turned anyway to make it sound, mysterious, and it isn't, because that doesn't help anyone and it actually harms any sort of investigation or something like that. But when if it's a story about by people who are still with us or lived many years after or weren't harmed during it, I have no problem with those stories. I like those stories, and this is kind of one of those stories. But that's not what we're here about. This is about the Yeti. And first, I just need to say this. Those of you that know me know I'm a geologist. All right, that's my profession, it's my education, but I'm a scientist, and I know a lot of people who study life. They're biologists. They're either their focus is primates, or something, insect, something. And out of every biologist I've talked to, there is no way that we're talking physical entity here. We're not talking supernatural. There's no way a large bipedal ape can exist in those temperatures, in those cold temperatures, with no support. Just look at people that live in the Arctic or Siberia or high in the mountains. They need a lot of support. They need animals, they need food sources, they need clothing, they need sources of warmth. All these things, they need this support system. Big hairy apes wandering around scavenging for stuff that's barely even nutritional is not going to sustain a population. It's just not. So there's the chances of Yetis actually existing are essentially zero for all intents and purposes, or 0.0000001% that they might exist. Something's like it's zero. Okay. Same thing with Sasquatches. I mean, they might have a little more of a food source, but they're just big bipedal apes. And if there was a sustainable population, we would have discovered them by now. And I don't want to hear any arguments like, yeah, but we haven't discovered a lot of... Yeah, but it's not like there's woolly mammoths we haven't discovered wandering around out there. These are large bipedal mammals. And being related to humans, they make a lot of noise. So, you all watched videos of apes and monkeys. They're very vocal. Okay? They're not going to be these stealth sleuth creatures. And even if they were, for some reason, they have no support system as well. They don't make fires. They don't build shelters. Well, some people claim they do, but there's no way a large breeding population could be sustained. Now, if you're going to claim it's all supernatural, aliens, interdimensional, you're far off there in La La Land, and I can't help you. But as physical creatures, they can't exist. They just can't. You may be those pictures of Sasquatch, yeah, but there's a reason why there's so many Sasquatch videos, because it's the easiest thing to fake. But not a lot of Yeti videos. Wonder why. It's harder to fake a Yeti, because a human being in a suit like that would be pretty uncomfortable in a high altitude or deep snow environment. So humans don't fake them there. They fake them where it's warmer, nicer, and wherever. Anyway, I digress. You need evidence, and just right now there is no evidence. And this video goes mostly through footprints. I'm not a footprint expert. I don't know any. But what I do know is certain animals in the Arctic, in order to not be stuck in the snow a lot for a long period of time, even though they do better than we do, is they jump and hop. And if that gets melted a little bit, it can look funky. Okay. And, I'm not a footprint expert, and the people walking and selling this stuff are not footprint experts. Okay. But that's not what we want to get. That's not what I'm reviewing this for. I suggest you watch it. It's a good story. It is. I'm going to show you the problem with the woo peddling. Now, as someone who was in the military for 10 years and has posted weird happenings that I've had, that doesn't mean it was supernatural. And I'm going to get into what he says and how seeds of, I don't want to put skepticism because it's not skepticism, seeds of reality denial are planted, okay? Because I'm also a scientist. So let's get into it a little bit before I babble too long. We're about, as you can see, more than 3/4 of the way through.
Dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, fewer explorers have ventured out looking, as many of the regions where this strange creature has been reported have long been politically unstable. Economic conditions in Russia, who inherited many of the scientific institutions and opinions of the old Soviet Union, have likewise not been favorable in allowing continued research on the creature. As such, public interest has ebbed away, and little effort in finding the Yeti has been made in recent years. Something that the Indian Army's mountaineering team had perhaps hoped to change with their newfound discovery in 2019. The world, in all its self-assured wisdom and short-sightedness, might view the Indian Army's most recent discovery as something to laugh at.
Now, see what was said there? Short-sightedness, whatever. The world to laugh at. I don't laugh at claims like this. I don't think these claims are funny and should be scoffed away. I believe you should try to find the real reason. You just don't jump to something that's never been observed as your reason when there's completely other reasons otherwise. And a lot of these don't seem like Indian foot or Yeti footprints, Indian Army mocked over claim. None of these seem to be people laughing, ridiculed. It's just reporting on the reactions. And that doesn't seem like they're ridiculing them. But whatever. But you see what was done there? All right. Now we're going to keep going because more of that type of stuff is done.
But how many more times have our servicemen and women experienced something strange while exploring new or isolated places?
Yeah, that's true. I have too. But here's the thing. People in the military, even well-trained people, we're still human beings. We're still subject to the same effects. I know, as somebody who was in the Army, you like to think you're above the average person, but you're really not. I mean, the same things that affect everybody else affect you. We're all human beings. We're all from the same small stock of people. We may look real different, but we're really not. All right. Training and education can help pull back on some of that, but it never really stops that. And if you're put in a place that you're not used to, you're not familiar with, you're not, it's not your backyard, you're going to look at things differently. It's human nature. It's our primate nature. Oh crap, what was that noise? Is that a predator? Oh crap, what was that? We're still animals that do that. We like to think of ourselves as this monumental achievement of evolution, which evolution doesn't have achievements, but that's how we think of ourselves because we can speak and we have cool toys. But the reality is we haven't changed. I mean, we're still scared little primates. Why do you think so many horror movies take place in the forest? Which is kind of ironic because when we were apes, that's where we lived. But as we left the trees, we became afraid of the forest because the forest shrunk. Why? That's why you look at pictures psychologically of landscape settings. The one that people pick out the most as the most uncomfortable is a forest at night. That's because our brains are wired that way. And the most acceptable one is a big open grassy field on a sunny day because our ancestors have been bipedal for a long time. And when you walk high, if you think about it, we are big mammals, but we're not huge mammals. And, 6 feet, eye height of 5 to 5.5 feet. How big are most mammals with an eye height that high? Almost the size of a full-grown moose, which are a lot bigger, but we walk on our two hind legs. So we can see, the further we can see, and we make tools, the more safe we feel. So if you're put in an unfamiliar situation where you have zero experience, your mind starts doing things on you. And especially add sleep deprivation to that, along with long shifts and physical exertion and exhaustion, which the military is known for. It's going to mess with you. I don't care what the military says, sleep deprivation does fuck with you. All right. And you don't need to be like getting 2 hours of sleep for a week and a half for that to happen. Just a couple of nights of low quality or a couple hours of sleep will start doing that to you. Or no sleep. You don't need, long periods of time. Anyway, I digress. Let's move on.
only to be mocked and ridiculed for their testimony.
Some people will mock and ridicule, but he's making it sound like that's all that happens, and that's not all that happens. They aren't ridiculed and mocked strictly, and I know he may not even be intentionally doing that, but it looks like that. When I see something like that, it's I don't want to say this because it's not, but it's almost self-victimization, you know. I let me, because that's not really what it is, but it's setting the stage to be skeptical towards naysayers without addressing what naysayers actually say. Okay, let's put it that way.
And are these men really that foolish for simply believing in a legend backed up by centuries of reported encounters and other evidence?
First of all, it has nothing to do with being foolish or anything like that, okay? When people tell stories like this, that is not the first thing that comes to my mind, is that they're foolish. I will say this, though. What evidence? As a scientist, we have a higher standard of evidence than the average Joe does, okay? We use something called empirical evidence. And the weakest form, and you'll never see it done in the hard sciences, is the use of a testimony or a story with nothing to back it. And even a video of somebody telling a story of something is not evidence that happened. It's evidence of somebody telling a story and recording it. You guys got to learn what evidence is. And they have pictures, and the pictures are legit of this, but that doesn't mean they're Yeti prints either. Yeah. And as for all the evidence of the Yeti, footprints are not empirical evidence, especially if they're unidentifiable and you don't have a creature to tie it to. If you had a creature to tie it to, that would be different, but you don't. So that doesn't count as empirical evidence. If you're talking about the skins and stuff that have claimed to be that of Yetis, everyone that's been tested has been found out to not be a Yeti. So when you're batting 0 for 10, you're pretty much falsified, okay? Now, can science sit there and absolutely say a Yeti doesn't exist? No, because proving a negative is hard to do. Well, science never proves anything anyway. But we can falsify these claims. And just from the falsification progress of this, you keep putting forth stuff, it keeps getting knocked back. It keeps getting knocked back. At least from a scientific standpoint. And young Earth creationists do this too. They put forth stuff that they think is evidence, and it gets knocked back and falsified. But they keep doing it. So if you keep getting kicked back and falsified, that should tell you something, that maybe your thought process is on the wrong path. Okay? Does that absolutely mean, beyond a shadow of a doubt, a Yeti doesn't exist? No. Does it mean a Yeti doesn't likely exist? Yes. Remember I said 0%? When your margin of likelihood is so small that it's so close to zero, it's essentially zero. All right. But, science just falsifies things. It doesn't seek absolute truth or proof.
For those of us who do find the stories credible, the lingering question is how these creatures have remained undocumented by mainstream science.
And that's another thing, too. and people need to stop saying this, there's no such thing as mainstream science. Just like there's no such thing as Western medicine. All right. I know people like to say, oh, yeah, there is. No, if it works as medicine, it's just medicine. If it's scientific, it's just science. There's no mainstream science. I hate that. That's obnoxious. It's a dog whistle, and it's really pushed by people who like to make up stories but don't have anything to back it up. So when you say stuff like that, at least from a scientific standpoint, your credibility drops. But even that being said, you can be the most uncredible, or is it incredible? No, it's uncredible person on the planet. But if you have empirical evidence to back up what you're saying, I have to address that because you're applying the scientific method. That's just science. It doesn't matter if you're credible or not. Credibility of a witness has as much say in science as the testimony of a witness. Zero. We don't use it. Okay?
After so many years of reported encounters and improvements in our technology, for that, we can only reason and answer by logical deduction.
You're assuming that these things exist, first of all, off non-empirical evidence and hearsay. So if you want to get into logical deduction, you're already moving off that path. But we'll just accept that. Let's move on. Because like I said, I do like the stories he tells. But this is the kind of... I'm not going to get into 411 cases here. We'll address that in another video.
First, we might humble ourselves to realize that, as advanced as we have become, the Earth remains quite large, and many regions and harsher climates still lie far beyond human reach or scientific exploration.
That is true. And I do agree with that. With our technology and stuff, we think technology is a magical weapon, this magical thing that's forever going to get better and better, and eventually we'll have warp engines and be able to transport and all that stuff. But that aside, we do sit there and tend to rely on it too much and give it too much credit. Now, there are also a lot of places that have not been explored by humans. But this region of the world has a lot of people. Now, you may sit there and say, yeah, but they don't walk up the mountains very often. Yeah, they probably don't, but there are people that live up here. It's not like northern Canada or Greenland or someplace like that are truly remote. Okay? Northern Canada, it's not like that. But even if it is, that still doesn't mean anything, because science on a mammal this big and supposedly been persisting for this long, according to what people say, and assuming it is a real animal, there's no way we would not know about it. It's just to have a breeding population to keep this thing going, we would know about it. And there's no large mammals like that are unknown. When we say we discover new species, it's never like a bison-sized thing. It's always something smaller, or something that in regions that we can't get ourselves into. A lot of people have explored this area over the years. Is it possible for something to hide in that? Yes. Is it possible for an 8 or 10 foot bipedal ape to hide in this with no support system? No, it's not. Now, especially with things like, I'm not going to say that, because that really isn't a point to make. I was going to sit there and say with satellite imagery and Google Earth and stuff like that, but this kind of stuff can still be missed on something like that, so I'm not going to say that. Anyway, let's move on.
And as the disgruntled Soviet scientists pointed out, there is the financial consideration. Someone does have to fund this research, after all. And we might also consider that even wolves, highly intelligent animals and fearsome predators, in fearing the consequences of prolonged human contact, they will retreat further and further into reclusiveness until their existence becomes practically unnoticed by us.
That's also not a point to make. Well, for one, we know wolves exist. And two, you can't equate wolf behavior to primate behavior. The two may not be similar, because I can sit there and talk about mountain lions too. Mountain lions are very reclusive, isolated animals. But here's the thing, when humans start encroaching on their territory, they do the opposite of what most predators do. They kind of fight back, if you will. Okay? Bears are another one. So you can't just sit there and use the example of a wolf. That assumes a behavior of an animal you know nothing about and have never documented or anything like that. So, yeah, let's move on.
By comparison, what could then be said of a bipedal creature like the Yeti, something resembling a man, which would presumably have a much higher level of intelligence than a wolf, the ability to reason, to plan, and not to mention their clear ability to hunt?
Number one, we'll just say that's all true, that they probably have a higher intelligence. But, and talking about its ability to hunt, to live in that environment, you would have to. You're not going to sustain yourself off tree bark and moss and be that large of a mammal. Not a primate anyway. So, yeah, so you'd have to hunt. But how do you know that? You don't know that. All you know are the stories you've been told. I mean, that's not evidence. Okay, let's
and live comfortably in harsh conditions that we humans require special gear and training to survive in. Something like a Neolithic man, an evolutionary offshoot of Gigantopithecus.
I hear that a lot ever since Gigantopithecus has been discovered. Every Sasquatch peddler has used that, especially if it's in the old world, as being a descendant of that, but that doesn't make any sense. And apes are not known for their adaptation to cold climates. Even we aren't. I mean, I like the cold. I prefer the cold. I prefer the snow. But if I'm buck naked, I'm going to die out there. Okay? As where if you put me near the equator buck naked, I'm probably going to be a lot more comfortable. But primates are not cold adapted creatures in general. They're just not. That's not our thing. There are very few primates, found in cold climates. So we're just not built for that. And our ancestors weren't built for that. And our relatives aren't built for that. The only reason why we can survive it is because we can figure out a support system. We have technology. We live in large groups. And we have things like clothing and fire. These things don't have any of that.
There is much we do not yet understand about our own human origins, let alone those of hard-to-find creatures. And as much confidence as our modern science projects about its collective findings, we certainly do not know.
This is one of my pet peeves. And as much confidence as our modern science projects. Only non-scientists say stuff like that. Scientists, like I said, we are human beings, and scientists, we do like our pet theories. And I use that in the colloquial term. I'm not using it in the scientific term. We like our own pet things. Okay? Does that mean we're right? No. Do we know we're not right? Yes. We are aware that we can be humbled at any point by someone else. At least most of us are. Probably 99.9% of us. Every group of people has its, machismo, over the top, arrogant, self-loving narcissists. But by and large, we know we don't know everything. You'll never hear a scientist say, yeah, we know pretty much everything. None of us will ever say that. If you ask me, hey, Steve, how close are we to knowing everything about life and the universe? I'd be like, we don't know shit. Okay? Because we're stuck on this planet, too, which is a problem. But anyway, let's move on. So when I see this, I know it's by a non-scientist. I know that. And which, you don't have to be a scientist to talk about this stuff. But this, too, is the kind of thing where it's like, oh, yes, scientists are arrogant assholes. And, they think they know everything. See, it feeds that narrative. Even though it may not be intentional, or it might be, whatever.
Everything. I was rather surprised to learn that the collective sum of all of our human evolutionary evidence, the fossilized bones and artifacts of animals like the Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalensis, and every species in between, All of the evidence we have found, if piled together, it would hardly fill the bed of a small pickup truck.
That's also not true. I've heard that before, and I don't know where he got that from, and I don't know where I heard it from. Probably in some video with young Earth creationists. I'm not saying he is. He's obviously not a young Earth creationist. I'm just saying they're notoriously good at badly lying about human evolution. So that is not true. It depends on what evidence, fit the bed of a pickup truck. Well, there's more than that. It's more than just remains. Are you talking about just the remains? Are you talking about the other stuff associated with those people? Their tools, their charcoal pits, their shelters, or that's it's meaningless. That statement was meaningless. And when it comes to human evolution, that might have been true 70 years ago. Well, close to it, but 60 odd years ago, that was probably true. Okay. But we have so much. We actually understand the evolution of human beings better than we do a lot of other things. All right. Because it's so recent and humans tend to wander. Now, most things get fossilized in a marine or fluvial river type setting, but not always. And humans being wanderers, we go to more unique environments and we get buried in things like ash flows. We get buried in things like cave collapses, stuff like that. All right. We also bury our dead, which helps preserve us a little better. Well, us, Neanderthals, and maybe Heidelbergensis did. I'm not sure about that, but Neanderthals and us do that. So, it's not for lack of evidence compared with other things. It's just the fossil record by its very nature is incomplete. That's why we've been relying on DNA so much. That doesn't mean anything, but we do have fossil evidence of human evolution. We have zero evidence of Yeti evolution or Sasquatch evolution.
And that's because the majority of these findings are very small in size, bone fragments and teeth. For instance, in 1935, it was Ralph von Koenigwald's discovery of a fossilized tooth in China that led to the discovery of the Gigantopithecus species. This small amount of evidence is what led to a fossil hunt for more evidence, and in the following decades, thousands of more teeth and sections of jawbone have been found to verify the existence of this animal. But to date, no one has found any actual bones from the body of Gigantopithecus. So while textbooks and museums display artwork and full-sized models of this creature, our entire understanding of its size, its diet, when it lived, and when it went extinct has been derived from these fossilized teeth, and whatever paleontological information could be derived from the soil, from the areas where the teeth were found, and from comparisons to modern primates.
Yes, exactly. And yes, scientists make art. We do that. Is it a lot of times is it based off incomplete evidence? Yes. But why do you think we knew that was the jaw of an ape? Okay? And we know the habits of apes. So we can infer stuff. Does that mean we're right about those inferences? No, it doesn't. Does it mean we're probably got a good idea? Yeah, maybe. But you can't claim the Yeti is Gigantopithecus. That's not. And by the way, we're pretty confident when it went extinct. So that's not a point to be made. They can't make that extrapolation because you at least have some evidence of Gigantopithecus where you have zero empirical physical evidence of a Yeti. So you're just making... See, this is what we call evidence from argumentation, which in science means jack and shit. Okay? It's done by people like young Earth creationists. It's done, by people who don't want to learn and don't want you to learn the science. Now, I'm not saying that's his goal here. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just speaking in general because I've dealt with these people for so long. I know these tactics. And this may not even be intentional by him. I honestly don't think it is. Because just the way he speaks about other things, I think he's been influenced by others who say that kind of stuff. But he's not really the kind of person who doesn't want you to follow science. Okay, that's not his goal. But this kind of language is from those people. I know it because I hear it all the time. Anyway, let's move on.
That's not to say that such a seemingly small amount of evidence lacks credibility, but to point out that while the world openly acknowledges the legitimacy of extinct creatures like Gigantopithecus because of their fossilized teeth, they have largely denounced the possible continued existence of creatures like the Yeti.
Yeah, that's because we have empirical evidence of Gigantopithecus and no empirical evidence of a Yeti. So science has this beautiful filter that philosophy does not have. If we can't test it now, does that mean it's bullshit? No, not necessarily. We shelve it or we just don't worry about it. Because none of this stuff is empirical evidence. These are photographs of prints in snow. Now, I don't know why this doesn't look like any primate foot I've ever seen. This would send up red flags that if this is some sort of legitimate print, it's clearly not that of a primate. I mean, this would have to be the inside of the foot, and our pinky toes aren't like this. So yeah, if this is a legitimate footprint, it's not of a primate or print, because it may not be a footprint. So this is not the same thing as finding teeth and jawbones and finding evidence of their activity in the soil. That's not the same thing. Okay, we don't infer bipedal diplodocuses with fur because we have evidence of diplodocus. See what I'm saying? And this is not empirical evidence right here. People need to learn the difference. Now, if you want to disregard empirical evidence and just go off the hearsay, the witness testimony, I can't stop you for doing that, but I can tell you that's not how science works.
In spite of the evidence and witness testimony
Once again, witness testimony means shit all.
provided. Just because they are still living doesn't mean finding their decaying bodies or bones would be any easier than those creatures like Gigantopithecus.
Yeah, it actually does. But anyway, that's also not a point.
What if these Yeti creatures do live in family groups and practice ritual burials like humans, or otherwise hide the bodies of their dead from potential scavengers? To that point, what if the answer to the Yeti's continued elusiveness is that it is intentional? If we have found so many samples of footprints and other indications of the Yeti's continued existence, who's to say these creatures have failed to notice ours? Certainly, if they exist, they know about humans, especially with all of these reported efforts to explore their territories and track them down against their will. Humans are very strange creatures ourselves, are we not? Beings who will go so far as to risk death, to travel across the world to climb the tallest mountain, and ultimately leave it littered with our many once highly motivated, and now frozen, corpses, still dressed in bright neon colors. And while we want...
He's referring probably to Mr. Green Boots on Everest. And I will say this. See what he said there? There's evidence of us doing stupid stuff all over the planet. But I'm not going to sit there and say that's evidence against a Yeti or anything like that, or talking point against the Yeti, because there are 8 billion of us. So I'm just going to let that go.
Nothing more than to find these creatures and to study them, to curb our own innate curiosity. What if they are intelligent enough to want nothing to do with us? Perhaps the further we have ventured into their territories, the further they have drifted out of our reach.
That, like I said before, that you can't infer that behavior, and you got to think things about food source too, diet. Now, something like this would have to hunt. And all these depictions, very once in a while, and I think this video might have one, you'll hear about them having a weapon. Well, no 8 to 10 foot bipedal ape is going to run down a rabbit. Okay? You need a tool. So, yeah. And the fact we don't see tools are more common than the being itself. I mean, if you were any sort of primitive human, your tribe probably had far more tools than it did people. So they're more likely to, that's why we find arrowheads all over the place, stone axes, stuff like that, even though we may not have any human remains or human ancestor remains. So, yeah.
And if we heeded the advice of a Tibetan Sherpa, perhaps this is the best case for both the Yeti's sake and for that of mankind. Because if it hasn't already happened, one day, an unwitting explorer might stumble upon this massive and ferocious creature face to face. And far from the issue of whether the world will believe his story or not, the real question is, will he survive to tell us about it?
No, that's just the cool ending of it. I'm just going to stop this here. But like I said, he does do good videos. And when he wants to be, he could be very logical, rational. But the thing I notice about non-scientifically minded people, I'm not just going to say scientists, I'm going to say scientifically minded people, is that we are really good at rationalizing things we do. We're not very good at rationalizing the natural world. Humans suck at that. You need training for that. And I can tell you, the military doesn't train you to understand the natural world. The military trains you to fight and trains you to do your MOS and trains you to stay up all night and kick yourself in the ass for a career you may not even know you're going to have, speaking of Ranger School. And other assorted shit. Okay? I don't dog the military. I love being in the military. I was going to be a lifer, but I only get 10 years. And that's a story for another time. So, scientifically minded people, I think, have a better grasp of the natural world than the average person does. So, people will be very logical and rational. Like somebody sends them a picture and makes a claim. People will be really good about checking the origin of that picture, tracking down where that picture came from, than they are understanding what some random noise in the forest was at night. For some reason, that's how human beings are. If my truck doesn't start in the morning, or your truck doesn't start in the morning, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Oh, crap. Maybe the battery's dead. Did I put gas in this thing? Maybe I should have got that timing belt fixed and I didn't. Or that alternator. We don't immediately assume gnomes and gremlins came in the middle of the night and started pulling wires. Because it's our technology. Even though I have no idea how to design and build a truck, and I am not a mechanic, nor am I an engineer. I'm not an engineer who designs internal combustion engines. It's still something I'm very familiar with, and I do have a basic understanding of. But when you put that same logical, rational human being out in the middle of an environment they're not familiar with, like high mountains, which, by the way, if you're not climatized to that, we have a whole set of other issues. But that aside, that's an environment most people are not familiar with. Or into a desert, or into a dark, cold forest. Our monkey brains kick in. Every little sound, everything that happens, you might be sitting in your cabin at night by yourself, or a cabin that you've never stayed at before, and all of a sudden you start hearing scraping noises on the roof. Most humans will be like, oh shit. What is that? Is that at best you'll be like, is that an animal on the roof? But at worst, people immediately will jump to, oh shit, is that aliens? Oh shit. That's how we are, because we get that fear in us. We're afraid of that environment. And that plays a huge part, even if we're not consciously afraid of it. And then you go outside and you find out the tree limb is rubbing on the roof. But most people don't even go outside. It's just, it's just, nature puzzles us, but our own technology doesn't, even if we don't understand the integral workings of it. So being logical and rational about something doesn't mean you're logical and rational all the time. All right, we are still human beings. Anyway, that's it. I think that's all I got to talk about at you, but leave questions and comments, all right? Bye.